In the sky, Chen looked at the figures retreating in the distance and sighed with relief. Fortunately, the shock brought by the previous killing of the Spirit King was so great that if not for that, it would have been difficult to drive these guys away today. Chen turned around, waving his hand. Two translucent spirit crystals, about half a meter in size, floated in front of him. With a flick of his finger, one of them flew towards Luo Li. "Let's split it in half." Luo Li smiled gently, nodded lightly, and with a graceful wave of her jade hand, she took her half of the spirit crystal. This was beneficial for her as well. With this half of the Spirit King crystal, she might gain considerable benefits from the upcoming spirit light baptism. "Let's go. We should leave here for now. The battle earlier was too intense, and we need to find a place to recover," Chen said as he also put away his half of the spirit crystal. Luo Li nodded, and the two of them no longer stayed, quickly determining their direction. In a few breaths, they disappeared into the distance. As they left, the mountain range returned to its calm, with only the land, now riddled with wounds, bearing witness to the tremendous battle that had just occurred. However, as they departed, they were unaware that the news of their killing the Spirit King had unknowingly stirred up some huge waves. At Baitsong Spirit Academy, Baiming Plaza, over the past few days, this vast plaza had been almost constantly packed with people. Countless students gathered here, looking up at the sky above the plaza. There, a giant light screen appeared, but within the screen, only 3 massive mountain peaks were faintly visible in the clouds and mist. At the peak of each mountain, 3 figures sat in silence, exuding an invisible pressure that made everyone in the plaza feel uncomfortable. They knew that this was the final point of the hunting war. Here, the final guardians of the hunting war would be, and that would be the final stage of the hunting war. Of course, they could only witness this grand battle on the last day of the competition. Until then, they would not be able to gain much information about what was happening in the hunting ground. However, there seemed to be an exception to everything. The light screen, which had been calm until now, suddenly rippled, and this strange change surprised countless students. Immediately, their gazes were drawn toward it. What's happening? Has someone already reached the final stage? Whispers of confusion spread, and everyone was clearly shocked, not understanding what this sudden change meant. At the front of the plaza, on the seats of honor, sat the headmaster of Tsong Academy. On either side of him were several elders from Baitsong Spirit Academy. They too looked up at the fluctuating light screen. Within the hunting ground, there were special elders monitoring the situation. Generally, if the screen displayed anything other than the final stage, it would only reflect major, heavyweight events. Amidst the puzzled gazes, the light screen gradually formed a clear image. It showed a mountain range, but now the mountains were trembling, and a giant light figure, several hundred meters tall, stood amidst them. The overwhelming spiritual energy radiating from it was shockingly strong. Is that the Spirit King? As the giant appeared, a wave of astonished voices erupted from the plaza. Many people's faces changed drastically. Although most of the people here had not participated in the hunting war, they had learned a lot about it in the past few days. They naturally understood the significance of the Spirit King. They actually brought out the Spirit King? Not only were the students shocked, but even the elders on the seats were surprised. However, their brows furrowed. Why does this Spirit King look weaker? This is a newly born Spirit King, the headmaster of Tsong Academy said, his starry eyes fixed on the giant in the light screen, a smile on his face. The elders nodded in realization and then looked on with great interest. Even though this Spirit King had just been born, it was likely not something these students could deal with. They wondered which unlucky individuals had encountered it. The light screen focused again, and 2 figures became increasingly clear in front of the Spirit King. When the crowd saw their appearance, a burst of exclamations erupted. That's the new student named Chen. The beautiful girl beside him must be Luo Li, right? 15th on the heavenly ranking. The 2 figures were quickly recognized, and the entire plaza erupted in uproar. Everyone wore expressions of shock. This discovery had completely exceeded their expectations. In one corner of the plaza, Yi Qingling, Zhou Ling, and other members of the Luo God Association stared at the light screen, mouths slightly agape. Their expressions were odd. Though they had expected Mu Chen to stir up trouble in the hunting ground, they hadn't imagined he would drag Luo Li into a battle against the Spirit King. That was a being on par with the heaven-reaching stage. Amidst countless astonished gazes, the light screen flickered. The battle had erupted. The scene flashed chaotically, the ground trembled violently, and both sides had already clashed. As the battle played out on the screen, the initial shock on the faces of the observing students gradually gave way to solemnity, and eventually, even a hint of fear crept into their expressions. Because they saw it, the mighty Spirit King was retreating. The final image captured by the screen was Luo Li swinging her sword. A streak of azure light slashed across the battlefield, and as the earth quaked, the colossal Spirit King was cleaved in two, collapsing with a thunderous crash. The light screen trembled slightly, and the entire plaza fell into complete silence. The Spirit King had truly been slain by Mu Chen and Luo Li. Up in the elevated seats, the elders wore expressions of astonishment. The Grand Song Academy headmaster's eyes remained locked onto the screen, his gaze lingering on the slender figure within. A flicker of surprise crossed his eyes as he murmured, "That little girl is from the Luo God clan? And that sword in her hand, could it be the Luo God sword? That is the clan's most treasured artifact. Headmaster, her grandfather should be none other than Luo Heavenly God." A white-haired elder beside him spoke. He was the very same elder Mu Chen and Luo Li had encountered when they first visited the Spirit Value Hall. Luo Heavenly God's granddaughter? The Grand Song Academy headmaster's surprise deepened. He let out a soft chuckle. That old fox actually allowed his precious granddaughter to come to our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy for training? But this girl is indeed exceptionally gifted. At such a young age, she's already capable of wielding the Luo God sword. Impressive. His gaze then shifted suddenly, now falling upon Mu Chen's figure. That boy, Mu Chen, was it? Heh, the incidents in the spiritual road. Wasn't he the one behind them? The elder beside him chuckled and nodded. That matter stirred up quite the commotion. Back then, the Sacred Spirit Academy was determined to have him erased as punishment. But in the end, it was only because you opposed it, headmaster, that he was merely expelled instead. The Grand Song Academy headmaster smiled faintly. This boy is a rare talent. With proper guidance, he might not fall short of Shan Songxing or Li Xianong. As for what happened back then, the Sacred Spirit Academy clearly broke some rules, secretly assisting that boy named Jixian. Did they really think no one would notice? The final outcome was simply them reaping what they sowed. The white-haired elder nodded in agreement. They saw Jixian's talent and wanted to use him to suppress our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy in the next 5 Academy tournament. If they succeeded, they might have been able to claim the position of Academy head. The Grand Song Academy headmaster narrowed his eyes slightly, staring at the young figure within the light screen. He chuckled softly, murmuring to himself, Jixian may be a once-in-a-generation prodigy, but this Mu Chen, he's not so simple either. As the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy erupted in an uproar over the images in the light screen, the hunting ground was no less shaken. At that very moment, a shocking announcement resounded across the entire spirit light realm. In the treacherous northwest region, at an extremely high-risk gathering point, a Spirit King has been slain. The ones responsible, Mu Chen and Luo Li. Wrapped in boundless spiritual energy, the message instantly echoed throughout the hunting ground, sending countless individuals into utter disbelief. A Spirit King had been slain? The entire hunting ground was in turmoil. Shocked expressions spread across every face. For years, no student had ever slain a Spirit King, until now. And the ones who did it, weren't Mu Chen and Luo Li just freshmen? How could they possibly have accomplished such a feat? Countless students exchanged looks of disbelief. If not for the resounding voice still reverberating through the sky, they might have thought they had simply misheard. They couldn't help but exhale in amazement. This hunting war had just revealed its darkest dark horse. Deep within the hunting ground, on a desolate plain, a lone figure strolled forward. A long spear rested upon his shoulder, and before him, An endless tide of spirit soldiers surged forward. He smiled, unbothered, as the tidal wave of spirit soldiers swallowed him whole. The dazzling golden light surged into the sky, like an unstoppable tidal wave sweeping across everything. The countless spiritual soldiers and generals were instantly reduced to dust, leaving behind a sky full of drifting spiritual light. The figure appeared again. With a sweep of his sleeve, he collected the vast spiritual light, then looked up. His hair spread out, and a sense of disdain filled the air, making his presence exceptionally striking. It was Chen. He stared toward the northwest, smiling. Chen, you really are an interesting junior. But I wonder, in the final round, will you be able to stand on the radiant platform? On a distant mountain peak, Li Xiantong stood with his hands behind his back, also gazing towards the northwest. His handsome face showed little emotion as he fixated on that direction. After a long moment, he turned and left, without saying a word. Bang! He outkicked a giant rock the size of a small mountain into powder. His eyes were dark, and the people behind him fell silent, not daring to speak. To be able to kill a spirit king, you've really got some skills, He Yao sneered, then turned and walked deeper into the area. His cold voice echoed back. That saves me some trouble. In that case, the Spirit King's light you have, I'll graciously accept it. The wave caused by the killing of the Spirit King continued to ripple through the hunting ground. Some marveled, some envied, and others doubted. But no matter what, everyone knew that the two new students named Chen and Luoli were likely to become the shining dark horses in this hunting war. In this arena where dark horses emerged one after another, they clearly had reached the front. Even Zhao Qingshan, who had been so dominant before, was overshadowed by their brilliance, and no one spoke of him anymore. While rumors about the Spirit King's death were spreading through the entire hunting ground, Chen and Luoli had disappeared without a trace. Nearly a full day passed without anyone seeing them. Some speculated that perhaps they had sustained heavy injuries. After all, regardless of their abilities, to kill a Spirit King would undoubtedly require some cost. In a secluded place in the Spirit Light realm, on a solitary peak, Luoli stood at the summit. Her clear eyes occasionally scanned her surroundings warily. After sensing that there was no movement, she turned to look behind her. There, the young man sat cross-legged on a rock, his eyes tightly shut, and waves of fluctuating spiritual energy emanated around him. Contrary to external speculation, the reason they had not appeared for an entire day was not because of their injuries. Although their battle with the Spirit King had been taxing, their wounds had completely healed in less than half a day. The reason for their delay was that Chen seemed to be in a state of breakthrough after the intense battle. After intense cultivation in the Thunder Domain, Chen had made progress in his strength. However, he had not broken through to the Heaven Transformation stage yet, merely reaching the Quasi-Heaven Transformation stage. Though the difference was only a single word, the gap between the two was significant. Only by stepping beyond that threshold could one truly grasp the mysteries of the Heaven Transformation stage and possess its power. Previously, Chen had felt like he was stuck, unable to break through. But unexpectedly, during his recovery after the battle, that peculiar sensation had emerged, bringing him great joy. This breakthrough was akin to an epiphany, unrelated to the sheer strength of spiritual energy. Chen knew that in terms of spiritual energy alone, he could already rival experts of the Heaven Transformation stage, but without breaking through the barrier, his power was merely stronger than those in the Heaven-reaching stage. To truly experience the essence of the Heaven Transformation stage, however, was out of reach. That small step was not easy to take. On the blue rock, Chen sat quietly, letting the fluctuating spiritual energy surge around him. His breathing remained unusually calm, as if unaffected by anything. Inside his body, spiritual energy surged, yet he did not consciously control it. Instead, he allowed it to flow freely. In his chi-si, the luminous divine soul sat, its body emanating a glowing aura. A peculiar fluctuation seemed to subtly emanate from its surface. The divine soul slowly opened its eyes. Its gaze was as deep as the night sky, and it spread its arms, as though embracing the heavens and earth. Boom! The light on the surface of his divine soul body grew brighter, and his small frame seemed to be slowly rising. After a moment, it reached the edge of the Qi Sea. At that point, a sensation of resistance emerged, causing the divine soul to become immobile. The divine soul remained still, immersing itself in the strange feeling of resonating with the heavens and earth. Then, an external force, as if the very heavens and earth themselves, seemed to exert a pull, gently drawing Mu Chen's divine soul out of the Qi Sea and its restraints. A beam of light appeared from his lower abdomen and passed through his body, shooting up toward the crown of his head. Whoosh! A clear, piercing light erupted suddenly from the crown of Mu Chen's head, shooting straight into the sky. The light was incredibly strange. It had no visible fluctuation of spiritual energy, but it gave off an impenetrable feeling. Divine soul separation, merging with the world. Luo Li watched this scene, a smile of delight appearing at the corner of her lips. Reaching this step meant that Mu Chen had truly stepped into the realm of heaven transformation. The heaven transformation stage refers to the point where the divine soul breaks free from its restraints, merging with the world. The soul can hide itself at will, making it nearly impossible to track. Even if attacked, the body can merge into the world, reducing the damage taken. This is why those at the heaven transformation stage are much more resilient than those at the heaven merging stage. It's not so much about their overwhelming strength, but because, when attacked, heaven transformation experts can merge with the world, automatically dissipating a portion of the incoming damage. At the crown of Mu Chen's head, the clear light surged. Soon after, his divine soul, about the size of a fist, emerged and soared upward, following the path of the clear light. When Mu Chen was at the heaven merging stage, his divine soul could only leave his body for a very short time and could not venture too far. But now that he had entered the heaven transformation stage, his divine soul was clearly much freer, its restraints lessening. The divine soul sat cross-legged within the clear light beam, hands spread wide, as if soaring freely between heaven and earth. His small face was filled with a look of intoxication. Mu Chen's body also emitted a faint glow. Luo Li observed that although she could see him sitting there with her naked eye, if she tried to sense it through fluctuations in spiritual energy, she would find nothing but emptiness. Unless she actively searched, there would be nothing to find. Clearly, Mu Chen had taken that final step. In the sky, the clear light beam gradually faded, and Mu Chen's divine soul descended. It entered his body through the crown of his head and returned to the Qi Sea, where it once again sat cross-legged. His tightly shut eyes slowly opened at this moment, and in his black pupils, a light as bright as the sun flickered before gradually dissipating. Ah! Mu Chen tilted his head back, unable to contain the exhilarating sensation within him. He let out a long howl, the sound thundering through the heavens, reverberating across the land. He stood up, feeling his body grow lighter. Though his spiritual energy hadn't visibly increased, he could sense that he had become much stronger. Now, his resonance with the world was much deeper. He could more easily draw spiritual energy from the heavens and earth, and the degree of resonance was far beyond what it was before. Having crossed the threshold from the quasi-heaven transformation to the heaven transformation stage, Mu Chen had finally stepped into this realm. Congratulations, you've now reached the heaven transformation stage. Luo Li stepped lightly forward, her exquisite face adorned with a smile that sparkled with joy. Reaching the heaven transformation stage is still far from enough, Mu Chen said with a slight smile. He had told the girl in front of him that he would become a peerless expert, but now, he knew he still had a long way to go. We should leave now. Judging by the time, the hunting war should be nearing its end. We need to head to the deepest part, Luo Li said. Mu Chen nodded. In the deepest part, there were still the true guardians. Though they had obtained the Spirit King Crystal, if they couldn't pass the final test, not only would the Spirit King Crystal be useless, but even the other participants in the hunting war would return empty-handed. Mu Chen clicked his tongue, feeling the pressure building. Though he hadn't yet encountered the 3 final guardians, he anticipated that their strength would surpass that of the Spirit King. To defeat them, all the students participating in the hunting war would likely feel immense pressure this time, wouldn't they? Mu Chen sighed, then took Luo Li's small hand, and the two of them swiftly darted off. After briefly consulting a map to determine the direction, they set off toward the southeast. About an hour later, their pace slowed, and they landed on a small hill not far away, where several figures were waiting for them. It was Wang Tong, and Ran, and the others. This was the agreed-upon meeting point they had set earlier. When Wang Tong and the others saw Mu Chen and Luo Li arrive, they immediately let out a long sigh of relief. They had been waiting here for a whole day. You guys finally showed up. I thought something had happened to you if you didn't come soon, Wang Tong said, wiping the cold sweat from his forehead. Mu Chen smiled and replied, we took a short rest and lost track of time. You two are quite the famous figures in the hunting ground now. So many people are looking for you, Wang Tong whispered. What? Mu Chen was taken aback. News of you killing the Spirit King has already spread throughout the hunting ground. Everyone knows you have the Spirit King's spirit crystal. If they can snatch it from you, they'll achieve a perfect result during the spirit light baptism, and Ran explained with a smile. So now, many people have set their sights on you too. We thought something had happened when you didn't show up earlier. Mu Chen's brow furrowed slightly. He hadn't expected such trouble, but he simply waved his hand and said, if there are people who don't know their place, then they can't blame us for being rude. As his words fell, he flicked his finger, and several purple spirit crystals shot out toward Wang Tong and the others. These are the spirit lights from late heaven transformation stage spirit generals. Take them, Mu Chen said with a smile. While underground, he had collected several dozen spirit lights from late heaven transformation stage spirit generals. Now, he decided to give some to Wang Tong and the others. Heh, thanks a lot. Wang Tong and the others didn't hesitate, eagerly taking the crystals. Spirit lights of this level were rare and valuable. Let's head out. We're going straight to the deepest part of the hunting ground. Mu Chen waved his hand and casually asked, anything else important to report? Wang Tong thought for a moment, then grinned. Right? I heard that the 4th place on the heavenly ranking, He Yao, has issued a challenge to Su Xian, who is ranked 3rd. The battlefield is set at the foot of Spirit Light Mountain. By now, most of the people have probably rushed over there. Mu Chen's eyes narrowed sharply. So, this guy couldn't hold back anymore, huh? As the time passed, the atmosphere of the hunting war had reached a boiling point. Countless students were frantically searching for gathering points. Some students who had already made progress rushed deeper into the hunting ground. Everyone understood that no matter how hard they fought here, if they couldn't pass the final challenge, all their efforts would have been for nothing. It was said that the final guardians this time were the 3 generals of the Xing Palace, the most influential figures from the previous year at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy. Back then, even the likes of Shen Songxing and Li Xintong might have been new students who looked up to these top-tier individuals. In previous hunting wars, there was only one guardian, but this year, the difficulty had increased dramatically. With the 3 generals standing in their way, even if Shan Songxing and Li Xinong teamed up, it was uncertain if they could make it through. This was a source of concern for many, but at this stage, there was nothing to be done about it. Everyone would just have to wait and see when the final battle began. After Mu Chen and the others set off, they made their way directly into the depths of the hunting ground without stopping. Even though they came across some gathering points, they didn't bother with them. At this point, they were already well-equipped, and ordinary gathering points didn't pique their interest. With their swift pace, they reached the deeper regions of the hunting ground after a day. Upon entering this area, they could immediately feel the intense atmosphere. The sound of wind breaking through the air was constant, as everyone sped toward the same direction. On a lone peak, Mu Chen looked at the countless figures in the sky, his eyes narrowing as they shifted deeper into the area. Along the way, they had gathered more and more intelligence, and Mu Chen was beginning to understand why He Yao had targeted Su Xian. Su Xian was gentle by nature and not particularly fond of conflict. Although she held the 3rd rank on the heavenly ranking, she never paid much attention to it. If someone strong enough wanted to claim that position, she might even willingly step aside. So, it was clear that He Yao's challenge wasn't driven by ambition for Su Xian's ranking. He was using it as a means to force out Mu Chen, who had been missing for a day. And his motive was more than sufficient. Mu Chen had destroyed the Demon Gate headquarters, humiliating him. Now, Mu Chen also possessed the Spirit King crystal, which was more than enough reason for He Yao to act. So, I'm the real target. Mu Chen chuckled. He Yao is challenging senior sister Su Xian at the foot of Lingguang Mountain. He's clearly trying to lure you there, Luoli said softly. Looks like he's worried you'll set up a large number of spirit arrays somewhere and wait for him to walk into your trap. Mu Chen nodded. He Yao was indeed cautious, fearing that Mu Chen would use strategy against him. Instead of taking that risk, He Yao had decided to strike first, using Su Xian as bait to force Mu Chen into the open. That way, Mu Chen wouldn't have time to set up spirit arrays in advance. This guy is really cunning, Wang Tong muttered, curling his lips. He and his brothers had heard some of the history between Mu Chen and He Yao. Worried, he suggested, why don't the three of us scout Lingguang Mountain first? As for Su Xian, this is the Lingguang realm, so at worst, she'll be gravely injured and have to leave. There's no real danger to her life. Mu Chen shook his head and looked toward Lingguang Mountain. No need. That's the final battleground. He Yao will be waiting for me there. This fight between us is inevitable. He knew that He Yao had been hiding his true strength, but at the same time, since his assault on the Demon Gate headquarters, Mu Chen had grown significantly stronger as well. If He Yao thought he could suppress him like before, it wouldn't be that easy. Let's go. Without further words, Mu Chen waved his hand and took the lead, Luo Li and the others immediately following. As they rushed toward their destination, the hunting ground had already become a sea of people. At its core, a towering mountain, tens of thousands of feet high, stretched into the clouds, its peak shrouded in mist, obscuring the view. That mountain was Lingguang Mountain. At its summit, the three generals of the punishment hall stood guard. Beneath the mountain lay a vast platform, crowded with people as far as the eye could see. The noise was deafening, so loud that it seemed to scatter the clouds above. At the very center of this grand stage stood a massive stone platform, starkly empty amidst the teeming crowd. All eyes were fixed on it. On the platform, two figures sat facing each other, one man and one woman. The man had long, cyan-colored hair and an eerie, almost demonic charm to his features. The woman wore a flowing white dress, her stunning beauty exuding grace and gentleness. Both were among the most distinguished figures of Northern Heaven's spiritual academy, and their confrontation naturally drew unparalleled attention. He Yao, you've been waiting for an entire day. Are you still not going to make a move? On the stone platform, Su Xian's delicate brows furrowed slightly as she gazed coldly at the cyan-haired figure before her. Though her voice was calm, it carried a hint of mockery. Smart as she was, she understood exactly why He Yao had sought her out. He Yao gave a faint smile. Su Xian, you've always shielded that boy. But now that you're in trouble, he's hiding instead of coming to help. It seems your judgment isn't as good as you think. Su Xian's slender eyes lifted, her smile laced with sarcasm. He Yao, let's not pretend. You're using me to lure Mu Chen out because you're afraid he'll set up spirit arrays against you in advance. A cold glint flickered in He Yao's eyes, and he responded indifferently. You think too highly of him. I simply didn't want to lower myself to deal with a freshman back then. But if he dares to show up today, I'll make sure he understands that my Demon Gate headquarters is not something a nobody like him can destroy. He was able to slay a spirit king. Can you? Su Xian's red lips curled into a mocking smile. He Yao clenched his fists, his expression remaining calm. It was just a newly born spirit king. And from what I heard, it was already weakened after being besieged. He just swooped in and took the credit. There's nothing impressive about that. Their verbal sparring continued, but He Yao still didn't make a move, leaving the crowd watching in growing frustration. Yet, some among them began to realize his true intentions. His real target wasn't Su Xian at all. I know Mu Chen's temperament well. Since you've set this up, he will definitely come. But before he arrives, let me drain some of your spiritual energy. Su Xian's delicate hand clenched, and a simple yet lustrous jade bead appeared, rippling with the sound of crashing waves. I may not be able to defeat you, but wearing you down won't be that difficult. He Yao's expression darkened slightly as he stared at Su Xian, her icy face framed by the surging spiritual energy around her. Clearly, he hadn't expected her to go this far. Just to give Mu Chen an advantage, she was actually willing to step in and weaken him herself. You refuse to take the easy way out. Yao stood up, his eyes turning sinister. His hands slowly clenched, and the chilling aura around him made onlookers shudder. You overestimate that brat. No matter what you do for him, in my eyes, he's nothing more than a clown. Yao sneered. Then, with a sudden step forward, his boundless spiritual energy surged into the sky like an ocean. The greenish glow of his energy spread across half the sky, releasing an oppressive spiritual pressure that caused countless spectators to gasp in shock. This kind of pressure. Could it be that Yao has broken through to the heaven-reaching stage? A chorus of horrified voices erupted. Many top students looked at Yao with solemn expressions, their faces filled with disbelief. The sheer intensity of his spiritual energy pressure was far beyond what the heaven transformation stage could possess. At the edge of the stone platform, Xun'er's complexion turned pale, her small hands clenching tightly. No wonder her sister had said she wasn't Yao's match. She had already sensed it. His strength had reached such a terrifying level. Beside her, Li Qing and Guo Xiong also looked grim. Yao had hidden his strength too well. Su Xian's sharp gaze locked onto Yao, her fingers tightening around the radiant jade bead. She spoke calmly, "You hid for so long. Yet you've only got one foot into the heaven-reaching stage. With just this, I'm afraid you're still no match for Li Xianong." Still talking tough? Yao's eyes flashed coldly as he struck out with his palm. The surrounding spiritual energy roared to life, condensing into a massive emerald green energy strike that crashed down on Su Xian with crushing force. Whoosh! Su Xian raised her hand, and from the jade bead, a surge of deep blue waves swept forth, forming a massive water vortex that enveloped her protectively. Boom! The ground trembled as the waves shattered. Su Xian's face turned slightly pale as she staggered back several steps. Her protective vortex had been completely dispersed. Though her strength was at the peak of the late heaven transformation stage, there was still a significant gap between her and Yao. Let's see how many of my attacks you can withstand. Yao stepped forward mercilessly, striking again. Towering spiritual energy condensed into a massive palm and came crashing down. Su Xian's jade bead radiated a dazzling light, summoning another surge of water that enveloped her like a flowing shield. Boom! The energy palm struck the water shield, sending ripples cascading outward. Though the shield held, it was rapidly shrinking under the relentless assault. Su Xian was undeniably weaker than Yao. If not for the abyssal water spirit pearl in her hand, she wouldn't have been able to endure his relentless attacks for this long. But at this rate, it was only a matter of time before she lost. Inside the water shield, Su Xian clenched her teeth, pouring all of her spiritual energy into the abyssal water spirit pearl, struggling to hold out a little longer. Buzz! The shield trembled violently, its ripples growing increasingly frantic, on the verge of shattering. Outside the stone platform, Xun'er's eyes turned red with anxiety, her face filled with worry. Boom! Just as the water shield was about to collapse, a streak of spiritual energy shot through the sky like a bolt of lightning. It slammed into the massive spiritual energy palm, pressing down on Su Xian, shattering it instantly. Yao, you're really getting worse with age. You've completely ruined the reputation of the fourth on the heavenly ranking. As the spiritual energy streak dissipated, a cold voice, like a rolling thunderclap, resounded across the battlefield. Everyone's heads snapped up, eyes widening. In the distant sky, several figures were speeding toward them. Within a few breaths, they arrived in midair. At the forefront stood none other than Mu Chen. Mu Chen, he's here. Is that the Mu Chen who killed the Spirit King? With Mu Chen's appearance, the atmosphere in the world instantly boiled over. Countless people gazed with fiery eyes. At this point, Mu Chen had become the brightest dark horse in this year's hunting war, while Yao was an old powerhouse. With the clash between the new and the old, how intense would the battle be? Mu Chen, you finally dare to show yourself? Yao's cold eyes stared at the figure of the boy in the sky, filled with intense disgust. He said in a chilling voice, "Heh, I didn't expect that you would be so wary of me and even resort to such tactics to get me here. Mu Chen smiled lightly, his voice filled with unhidden mockery. He Yao stared at Mu Chen. The coldness on his face gradually faded, and with a faint smile, he said, "You're overestimating yourself. But fine, since you've come, it saves me some trouble. Hand over the Spirit King crystal to me, and then get out of Spirit Light Realm. As for the matter of destroying my Demon Gate headquarters, I'll let it slide." Mu Chen heard this and smiled. He clenched his hand, and the translucent spirit crystal appeared in his palm, glowing like a blazing sun. The spirit crystal hovered in his palm. A mocking smile slowly appeared at the corner of his mouth as he said, "The spirit crystal is indeed in my hands, but give it to you? Who do you think you are?" The previously chaotic atmosphere seemed to quiet down at that moment. Numerous students tugged at their mouths in disbelief. They hadn't expected Mu Chen to be so rude and show no regard for He Yao whatsoever. He Yao didn't speak further. His gaze at Mu Chen was like that of a predator eyeing its prey. "When I step on you, I hope you can still say that." He Yao's cold voice floated through the air. He suddenly clenched his palms, and immense spiritual energy shot into the sky, enveloping the heavens in a greenish-blue aura. The overwhelming spiritual pressure spread throughout the area. He could no longer tolerate it. He would trample Mu Chen underfoot. Mu Chen's gaze turned colder. He waved his hand slightly at Luo Li and the others, signaling them to retreat. Despite knowing He Yao's overwhelming strength, they still had confidence in Mu Chen. Su Xian also stepped back from the stone platform. Su Ling'er quickly supported her and looked worriedly at the two confronting figures. "Sister, do you think Mu Chen can really handle He Yao on his own?" At present, He Yao's strength had clearly increased, and even Su Xian couldn't handle him. Although Mu Chen had never been one to be judged by appearances, Su Ling'er still felt some concern. Back at the Demon Gate headquarters, Mu Chen was able to escape unscathed because he had made full preparations, and He Yao didn't want to reveal his strength. But now, He Yao clearly wouldn't hold back any longer. "Don't you understand Mu Chen's character by now?" Su Xian smiled gently, her beautiful eyes gazing at the figure of the boy in the sky. "Since he's here, it won't be so easy for He Yao to defeat him." Even when Mu Chen was only at the heaven merging stage, he was able to kill Bai Xian, who was at the late heaven transformation stage. Now that Bai Xian had reached the heaven transformation stage, it was even more impressive. Su Ling'er, hearing this, felt a little reassured and looked up at the sky. The tense atmosphere before the battle was almost suffocating. Whoosh! Just as the tension reached its peak, two streaks of light suddenly shot out from the towering Lingguang Mountain and appeared above the stone platform. It's Shen Songxing and Li Xiantong. As soon as these two figures appeared, the atmosphere in the area erupted with excitement and admiration. At Baiming's Spiritual Academy, only these two were truly the top powerhouses in everyone's hearts. Heh, what a lively scene! Shen Songxing stood in midair, his long hair flowing. He had a determined face, slightly thick eyebrows, and a dominating aura that made people feel no arrogance, because he was fully deserving of it. Beside him, Li Xiantong, with his handsome face, showed no emotion, his hands behind his back, looking quite carefree. "You two keep fighting," Shen Songxing waved at Mu Chen and He Yao, then turned to the crowd and pointed towards the mountain peak. "You all should know, the three generals are guarding up there." The area fell silent in an instant, with countless people exchanging puzzled glances. Had the three generals truly become this powerful? Were they really unable to handle Shen Songxing and Li Xiantong working together? If that's the case, doesn't it mean they will all fail in this hunting war and return empty-handed? All their efforts over the past half-month would have been in vain? Mu Chen furrowed his brow slightly. If even Shen Songxing and Li Xiantong couldn't handle them, then wouldn't the Spirit King crystal in his hands lose its value if they failed? However, there's no need to despair just yet. According to the rules for this round, we have 3 spots for the final challenge, Shen Songxing said with a smile. In other words, besides the 2 of us, there will be 1 more spot, but of course, that spot will only go to the strongest among you. As he spoke, his gaze flicked over Mu Chen and He Yao. "What's the benefit of getting this spot?" Mu Chen asked with a smile. Shen Songxing pointed to the crowd below. If you earn this spot, all of their hopes will rest on you. You'll become their savior in their eyes. It's a form of prestige. If you succeed, your standing at Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy will be no lower than ours. Mu Chun shrugged helplessly, completely unmoved. Also, according to the rules, if you make it through the final challenge, each of us will receive a true Spirit King crystal. Remember, a real one, not the newly formed ones like yours. Additionally, our spirit light baptism will be more advanced. Shen Zongsheng rubbed his chin, his gaze turning playful as he looked at Mu Qian and He Yao. At that moment, their eyes instantly brightened and became sharp. I'm taking that third spot, He Yao said, stepping forward with cold, piercing eyes, locking onto Mu Qian.